pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a TBR. Blasphemy, didn't I say I didn't do TBRs? Well, I don't usually, but this is a special occasion. As many of you know, Kendra Winchester, an illustrious booktuber, is also co-host of a wonderful podcast about women's writing called Reading Women. I'll put a link to her channel and her podcast in the show notes. And the podcast is having a reading challenge this year. I think there's about 20 or more, 25 prompts, reading prompts. I'm not actually taking part in the reading challenge because I am still recovering from having done 4 reading challenges in 1 year in 2017. So I've sworn off reading challenges for a while and I'm enjoying kind of my freedom. So Kendra and the Reading Women podcast are sponsoring a Reading Women Challenge Readathon in June. And I want to show my support for that. I'm going to be doing a couple of videos about fangirling some books for some of the prompts. Stay tuned for that. And I'm also proposing a Readathon TBR for myself. And it's completely unrealistic because June is a crazy month for me. I'm moving in with Kenji, my fiance. We're getting married in August and we're moving in June. So we're going to be living in sin for 1 whole month. So it's going to be a busy month. However, I want to read women as much as possible for whatever time I have. Toward that end, I have how many buddy reads here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 buddy reads scheduled in June. Even that is unrealistic, so I hope my buddy reading partners will be gentle with me if I'm not able to quite keep up. But I think I can do this much. So here are the 6 buddy reads. First is The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. This just came out last month or 6 weeks ago. I loved Meg Wolitzer's last novel, The Interestings, and I'm doing this novel as a buddy read with Amy Vickers, who is new to BookTube, and I had some small role in getting her on to BookTube, and she and I are going to meet once, maybe twice, to do a little discussion about the novel as we're reading it. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've heard really good things about this novel. Now, I will say at the outset, I'm a little bit nervous about it because I have never read a novel that I liked that was about a social political movement. So I think it's really tricky to pull off to satisfy me. So I'm going into it with that kind of caution, but I hope I'm proved wrong. I see I didn't bring my hardcover copy with me. I'm doing a buddy read of Muriel Sparks' debut novel, The Comforters. It's a reread for me. I studied it in college 1,000 years ago, and I'm buddy reading it with Adam of Memento Mori and Leah of Hide and Seek. And I have been on a real Muriel Spark kick this year. I did a buddy read with Leah of The Driver's Seat, and it just got me completely obsessed with Muriel Spark. It's her centenary year. This Polygon Press, I believe is the name of the Scottish publisher, is reissuing all 22 of her novels in a new hardcover edition, and I'm collecting them. I'm not much of a book collector usually, but I am collecting them. So really looking forward to doing this buddy read. Adam doesn't know it yet, but Leah and I have scheduled for the last 2 weeks of June. I'm also buddy reading a biography of one of my favorite writers of late. It's a biography of Barbara Pym called A Lot to Ask. A Life of Barbara Pym by Hazel Holt. Dirt cheap on Kindle, and I'm buddy reading this with Ange of Beyond the Pages. She and I are both fans of Barbara Pym, and we buddy read No Fond Return of Love just a couple months ago. And we're going to buddy read this biography and keep on reading Barbara Pym together into infinity, I think. Reading a lot of novelists from the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, I notice here, because I'm also going to be buddy reading this, Summer Will Show by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I'm buddy reading this with Britta Bollard. I'm really excited about buddy reading it with her, and it will be my first Sylvia Townsend Warner novel. This was written in 1936, and it is about a young English woman from an aristocratic family who sends her philandering husband packing off to Paris and then she raises the kids by herself in proper Tory fashion, and then tragedy strikes. The children die. It's not a spoiler, it's on the back cover, people. So really curious about that. Isn't that a lovely cover? I'm also, when I remember to do so, I better keep looking at my notes, I'm going to tag these to the prompts for the Reading Woman Challenge, even though I'm not doing the Reading Woman Challenge. So The Comforters, which I mentioned a minute ago, fits for prompt number 14, a classic novel written by a woman. And I think loosely you could call anything Sylvia Townsend Warner writes a classic, especially if it's published by NYRB Classics. Just, there's no debate, right? I'm also going to be reading my first Elizabeth Taylor novel, Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont. I have never, obviously, if it's going to be my first, I've never read her. I've been wanting to. I've been collecting them. This is one that I've had on the stacks forever. And I'm buddy reading this with Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventure. Our first buddy read. So I have to be on my best behavior. This is a short novel, so I'm going to talk to her. Maybe we can knock it off in a couple days. But I expect I'm going to love Elizabeth Taylor, from what I've heard of her writing. Mrs. Palfrey is recently widowed and moves into the Claremont Hotel. And there's a lot of eccentric characters, and then she meets a handsome young writer, Ludo. So we'll see what that's all about. I'm not sure if Elizabeth Taylor would count as a modern classic. You tell me. The sixth and final buddy read that I'm committed to doing in June. I have two more that if I can squeeze them in, I want to. But the sixth and final one is West by Karis Davies, and this will be a buddy read with Doris of Aldi Books, which will be our first buddy read. And this is a brand new novel, just out in the last couple months. I loved Karis Davies' short story collection, The Redemption of Galen Pike, I believe it's called. And this is maybe her first novel, and it's about a widowed mule breeder, which really makes me crack up. I mentioned it before. I said, I don't know if the wife died or the mule died, but anyway, he's widowed. And he lives in Pennsylvania and hears about dinosaur fossils being discovered in Tennessee. So he makes a trek down there. We'll see what it's all about. It's set, I think, in the 19th century. So I have two more. These were buddy reads that I committed to doing and then had to back out of committing to doing because I knew I had overcommitted myself. With Ange of Beyond the Pages, I committed to doing Grand Hotel by Vicky Baum, a German novel. Is it set in Germany? Yep. Weimar era bestseller. So published 1929 in German, translated 1930, 1931. Been hearing good things about it. This is the first book that Kenji ever bought for me, and that was 3 years ago, and I still haven't read it. So I'm going to buddy read it with an Ange. Don't think I'm going to get to it in June, but if not, we'll be buddy reading it together soon. It's about a grand hotel in the center of 1920s Berlin. And this one would qualify for the prompt number 1, a book in translation by a woman. That would obviously fit. Oh, there's the 5 o'clock chimes, people. I've explained that a few times. I'll just keep talking through it. Finish this video up. The other one that, if I can possibly squeeze it in, I'm going to buddy read in June, but it's probably going to be more like a July buddy read, is the Japanese novel Territory of Light by Yuko Tsushima. And buddy reading this with Britta Bowler. Newly translated or newly published in English. It's actually published in a literary journal in Japan in the late 1970s, but not in English until now, apparently. First heard about it, I think, on Eric Carl Anderson's channel, and it sounds fascinating. It's about a young Japanese woman whose husband left her, and she starts a new life in a Tokyo apartment. That doesn't necessarily sound, it's with a 2-year-old daughter. Doesn't necessarily sound fascinating, but you don't get many novels about such themes in Japanese literature. So I am just fascinated, and I have previewed 112. It's fantastic. It may or may not be in an upcoming video. Territory of Light would fit into prompt number 1, a book in translation by a woman. Also, for me, prompt number 22, a book by a local author. Yuko Tsushima died in 2016. I don't think she was that old, and I did learn just today she was the daughter of famous Japanese writer Osamu Dazai, who committed suicide when she was 1 year old. Again, if it's not June, it's going to be soon. Now let me talk about some audiobooks, because I will get to at least 2 audiobooks in June, because I can listen to audiobooks on the train and walking, and, you know, I can squeeze in some more women's writing that way. I've got 4 on my list here. One is Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. I didn't think this was for me. I'm not really a dystopian fiction reader, and I've read Orwell's 1984, and I've read most recently The Handmaid's Tale by Atwood, and then read some other ones that I thought were terrible, like the Women's Prize winner last year called The Power. But a lot of readers who I really respect have loved this novel, so I am going to try it on audio, if I like the audio narrator. I haven't tested that yet. White Houses by Emmy Bloom is available to me on audio. It's the one about Eleanor Roosevelt and her lover in the White House. Scott and Steve Donahue loved it. Here's one that I remember Jennifer of Insert Literary Pun raved about this on one of her videos that I watched when I first discovered her channel. So I don't know when she made the video, but it's not a recent video. I think it was one of her favorite books of all time videos, but I may have that wrong. Girl at War by Sarah Novick, about a girl in Croatia in 1991 during when all the troubles, the war and stuff, and it's supposed to be really good. So I have that on audio on script. Would love to get to that. And Sour Heart, short stories by Jenny Zhang. That one would fit the short story collection, and I've wanted to give that a try for quite some time. So those are the 4 audiobooks I would consider trying in June. And finally, this is the Dream On portion of my TBR. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but these are books that have been on my TBR that are women writers. I mean, it's kind of silly for me to do. In a way, it's kind of silly for me to do a TBR focus on women writers, because I read almost exclusively women writers. Men can't write. Even gay men can't write very well. So, did I say that out loud? But these are books I'm dying to get to, so let me go through them pretty quickly. The Life to Come by Michelle de Kretzer came into my life through Kendra Winchester raving about it and telling me, like, singling me out in the middle of her video to say, if you like Virginia Woolf, I'm looking at you, Sean. You'd love this book. Well, I was sold from that moment on. I've done the page 112 test. It passed that with flying colors. I'm dying to read this. I don't think I'm going to fit this rather chunky novel in June, but it would sure be nice. But if not, it's coming up soon. And that would fit prompt number 9, book by an Australian or Canadian author. She is a Sri Lankan Australian writer. Also, I'm dying to get to the Indian novel that was on the Republic of Consciousness shortlist, We That Are Young by Preti Taneja. I didn't even realize that was a woman's name until I found out it was, but I've heard really good things about that novel, about a billionaire family that are so corrupt and venal and all their exploits, and it's a really kind of a comment on the Trump era and the Modi era in India, and an intertext with King Lear. The Good Women of China by Xin Ran. This is a true story of her time as a talk show radio host where she interviewed Chinese women about their lives, which was an experience she had, you know, even now today would be kind of a almost dangerous thing to try to do in China, but when she did it, I actually don't know how recent the experience was, but anyway, that synopsis makes me love her, that she did it, and then she's written about it. I want to read the story. So this is a true story. I don't read much nonfiction, and this one I think I will like. This is a memoir, collection of essays, I'm not exactly sure, but it is nonfiction, by an Indigenous Canadian writer, Lee Maracle, who I have never read, but certainly am aware of. My Conversations with Canadians, where she talks about being Indigenous, being a Canadian, talking directly to settler Canadians about all of the issues. That it's the number 1 issue in Canada. I think that this would be a really challenging, perspective broadening and perspective sharpening read, so I want to get to it, but probably not this month. I have all of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's books in ebook format. I think when Trump won the election, iBooks put all of her books on sale for cheap, so I got the whole set for like $15 or something. I've only read Purple Hibiscus. I absolutely loved it. I want to read them in sequence. So next up is Half of a Yellow Sun, which some people, I just heard Lindsay of Lindsay's Book Life say today it's her favorite novel of Adichie's, and it's next up, so I want to get to that very soon. Next is the Israeli novel Waking Lions by Eilat Gundar Goshen, and this would fit the book by a woman in translation, prompt number 1. This book just sounds fascinating. It was on my radar, and then I heard Britta Bowler review it, and she really liked it, and it bumped up even closer to the top of my pile. It's about an Israeli doctor who's driving home one night, and he hits and kills an African refugee or African migrant worker, and then just leaves the scene of the crime because he's scared. He's a good man, saving lives by day, but he has this horrible accident and flees the scene. But the deceased man's wife sees him, observes him, she knows she's able to track him down and confront him, and the story goes from there, and it's supposed to be just incredible. It sounds amazing. And the last one on my "Are you kidding me" wish list of books I would like to get to in June, but probably don't have a hope in hell of getting to in June, is Sisters by Lily Tuck. This one came into my consciousness from Eric Carl Anderson, as per usual, and I have it on ebook and audio. The synopsis reminded me a lot of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So it's about a woman who's married to a man, but the man's ex-wife is really hovering over them and somehow intrapsychically in the relationship. So major Rebecca vibes from that, but I would curious to give it a try. It's a short little book. So that's what I hope to get to. I will definitely get to the buddy reads, the rest of it, and a couple of the audiobooks. The rest of it are just books that I would like to get to as soon as possible. How about you? What are you reading? Are you participating in the Reading Women Challenge? Are you participating in the Reading Women Challenge Readathon here on BookTube? Which of these books would you be most likely to read? And if I haven't already told you that I'm buddy reading them with somebody, which ones would you like to buddy read with me? Is that enough questions? Thanks for watching.